have our friend Josh Constine joining us today.
Hey.
He is a VC at SignalFire. But Josh, before we jump in, I'm just going to give you a chance to say hello, introduce yourself, and tell everyone about you.
Hey, sure. I'm Josh Constine. I'm a principal and investor at SignalFire, a venture capital fund investing seed to Series B in startups across verticals. And our specialty is helping startups with recruiting. We built this whole recruiting technology that can rank hundreds of millions of people in the tech ecosystem on both their skill level and hireability, which helps us give thousands of candidate intros to our portfolio companies. And previously, I was the editor at large for TechCrunch for 8 years and was the most cited technology journalist from 2016 to 2020, which seems like inconceivable, but was a lot of fun. I love the journalism life. And my personal mission is to help the world gracefully adapt to the future. I want to make people not afraid of what's happening next, to make them feel like they understand what's going to happen so that they can take part of it, so that they can bring whatever is unique from their personality, their ability to curate, their taste, or their vision for the future and bring it to everybody else and be sort of contributive to the larger society that we're building here on the internet.
So Josh, I'm curious, like you and I have had like this long history, right? In terms of like, I joined the reporting world long after you've been in the space. Like give our listeners and our viewers a little bit of background about what you did prior to joining SignalFire, because that sets a big foundation in terms of what you're doing now.
Totally. So I grew up always being super fascinated by how people interact, groups of friends, and how social circles developed. And so I got into sociology. And while I was at Stanford, I realized that social networks were uprooting or proving true most of the social theories. Facebook launched when I was a freshman. And I decided, this is something that I think we could study and is going to be have a huge influence on the world. And so I designed a master's program in cyber sociology. I was studying how people interact over the internet. I researched Facebook, Twitter, memes, anonymity, privacy controls, bullying, and I wrote my thesis about why I thought symbiotic memes or remixable memes were going to be the future of marketing, because people would inevitably create their own versions if they understood the template. They'd replace it with their own variables, they'd add it to the world, and that would drive attention back to the original. And now so much of what we think of as internet culture is about these remixes. And so I felt like maybe I have like a decent idea of how this whole thing works. And so quickly after that, I got picked up by a blog called Inside Facebook. It was an industry blog just about Facebook. Incredible company. Worked with Kim Cutler, who's now at Initialized, another VC fund. Eric Eldon was my mentor there and hired me. And then eventually me and Eric actually got poached by TechCrunch after Inside Network got acquired for $14 million for the six of us. It was incredible sort of to be part of that media exit and just have a tiny little piece of something super exciting. And then came over to TechCrunch and they said they wanted me to write about Facebook. So that's where I started. And my general belief is that you can become essential to the world by focusing on a niche, by picking one thing that you are endlessly curious about that's growing more important to the world and that someone somewhere makes money off of. And I think if you do that and you write in public about it enough, you will gain the expertise, you'll trade public attention for other people's knowledge, and you'll grow to be indispensable to the world. And so for me, that started with Facebook. I was writing religiously about Facebook. I mean, I wrote over 4,000 articles during my pro blogging career, over 2,000 of them just about Facebook and its family of apps. And that started with like ads API companies nobody wanted to hear about that were like these little things. And a few years later, they were getting acquired for $500 million. Started to learn about early stage startups, ended up writing the first coverage of companies like Robinhood, Figma, Clubhouse, and a bunch of other startups. And also started to do some public speaking about how to pitch startups, because I was just getting so many pitches, like just more than I could ever answer. And I wanted companies to be able to understand how to do that better. And that's sort of what led me to SignalFire. They wanted me to help their companies think through their pitch process, their public messaging, to help them think through content and how to be part of this media ecosystem, how to make things that actually help founders, and to learn to be an investor. And so I've been loving my role over here at SignalFire. But yeah, the journalism game was so much fun because it's just this incredible way. You're like, hey, if I give you some public attention, will you teach me the smartest things you know? And that's a great way to get smarter fast.
And you've had an immediate impact, right? I mean, it's like, what was it like? Just right after you joined SignalFire, your firm publishes this gigantic report you know, and what everybody is now often quoting is the landscape of the creator economy, that being 50 million creators out there. And it's almost like the Eileen Lee type of blog post that you got that you were at TechCrunch about unicorns, right? It's like that's often cited thing, and you've laid that foundation, and that has changed the landscape. That has been a major impact on not only on how we run our show, but also how we see the landscape. So I'm curious in terms of your perspective as a reporter. No, I mean, let's go further back from your time in college, right, to time as a reporter studying Facebook and studying the sociology of apps like on Twitter and all these other companies that kind of grow around it, to now as an investor. Are you seeing any significant trends, like any seismic shifts that in that, let's say, nearly 20 years of coverage?
So first, I want to give tons of credit to Yanling Wan, and aka YY, who works at our fund SignalFire. She was the original author of the report, did a lot of the data collection, and I just helped her with some of the editing, positioning, and some of the sort of takeaway insights. And the major things that we found, we saw that there was basically two major insights and three really important lenses for understanding how the creator economy has evolved. So first, let's talk about the phases. You know, when the creator economy started, it was mostly about using these big social networks to start to gain a following. You joined, and the only way to monetize was typically directly through the platforms. You can think of like YouTube and YouTube's ad share. That meant that you had to make content that appealed to the widest possible audience, because the only way for you to monetize was through the platform. And so that meant you're kind of making lowest common denominator content for everybody, and you had to be really brand safe, and you couldn't necessarily pursue your specific interests. But with time, these social networks got so big that we entered phase 2 of the creator economy, which was the rise of the influencer. Suddenly, brands wanted to actually pay for sponsored content, for getting their names dropped, to have themselves associated with these big name creators. And creators were able to monetize the enormous like specialty fan base, their actual closer fans, to be able to make money. And that meant taking sponsorship dollars. But again, you had to be brand safe. You had to appeal to the widest possible audience, maybe to like a specific audience like gaming or something. So gaming companies would want to monetize and sponsor with you. But still, you were relatively locked down, and you were entirely reliant on the social networks for distribution. And this put creators in a very precarious position. And it's what sort of started what I call the creator crisis. You know, a lot of these social networks viewed creators as free labor. They're just saying, oh, you make content for us, we'll give you some distribution. We don't even have to pay you directly. We'll let the brands take care of that. And that also meant that creators didn't have a direct connection with their audience. They were communicating with them through mediated channels. So you can think of like an algorithmic feed is a mediated channel where people you don't get to talk directly to your fans. You post something and you hope that the algorithm routes it to enough of your fans. And if anyone knows what's happened with Facebook over the last 10 years, organic reach keeps on dropping. Even if somebody subscribes to you, maybe only 10 or 20% of those people will ever see the things that you post. And that means it's really tough to be able to build a huge following. And it means you're always beholden to these platforms, and you end up enduring platform risk. And that's when you're sort of dependent on the platforms, and you put all your eggs in one basket. And I think the greatest example of this platform risk was Vine. And when Vine shut down, all of these creators who had built a huge following on Vine just lost everything. And it was only the ones that had kind of diversified, building their own email lists or building their YouTube channels or Instagram followings, that were really able to survive this, this terrible shift of Twitter shutting down Vine years before TikTok would become the most popular app in the world. It's like inconceivable now when you think about it. But really, it meant that creators, I think, were finally waking up that they needed to own the means of distribution. And that's what leads us to phase 3 of the creator economy, which is that creators are trying to move their biggest fans off of the top social networks to properties where they actually have control of distribution. That means being able to collect their email addresses, collect their phone numbers, be able to talk to them directly, rather than having to rely on these social networks. And what that also means is that because you're not just monetizing them through a fraction of a cent per view, or as a follower through a brand deal. Instead, you can actually sell them things directly, sell them merchandise, VIP experiences, cohort-based courses and education, and all sorts of other things. You can do Patreon style subscriptions. You can do direct payments like OnlyFans. There's all these different ways to monetize when you have a direct connection with your audience. And that means that you can start to make more subcultural content. You can focus into a niche that you really care about. And instead of trying to make lowest common denominator content for everybody, you can make things that actually appeal to your own personality as a creator. But I'm going to give you guys a heads up. So we're now moving into phase 4 of the creator economy. This isn't even in our creator economy market map yet. But what I think is happening next is that we saw this creator renaissance. So many new startups open up that were all trying to serve the creator market, unbundling all these different functions from the social networks, payments, CRMs, content info or contact info collection, content distribution, merchandise, all these different pieces of the puzzle. But it meant that creators effectively had to become founders. They had to be able to build their own team of specialists, data scientists, community managers, merchandise designers, and they had to cobble together all these tools, all these different startups from across the world, that were doing very specific, pinpointed point solutions. But that's like a full-time job of its own. And if you're trying to make content full-time, that's really difficult to do. And so what I think we're seeing now is in phase 4 of the creator economy, we're seeing the rebundling of creator tools, where instead of these two startups all being very separate, they're integrating, whether that means that they're trying to build hooks into each other so that you can use your membership from one thing to gain access to content on another platform. Or you're seeing startups like Spore, which SignalFire invested in, which is building all of these creator tools into one hub where they all work seamlessly together. So you take contact info on, they make you a free website, and then you can take contact info collection, and then it feeds directly into a CRM, which you can then message with email and marketing blasts, and you can analyze the analytics on all of that, and your content gets automatically routed to them. And you started to see all these tools integrating naturally together. That way creators can get back to doing what they're supposed to be doing, just making content, doing the thing that they love. So that's what I think is the biggest trends in the creator economy. We started with creators having to depend on the platforms for monetization. Then they grew really big and they depended on brands for monetization in the influencer era. Then they started moving off platform to own their means of distribution. They started to become CEOs of their own sort of creator companies. And now we're seeing those tools rebundled together to make it easier for creators to stay focused on what they love to do.
Great. Yeah, I have a question, I guess, in that arena, Josh. We've had this discussion many times on this show over the past few months. Creators wanting to be creators, I certainly understand, but to what extent do you sort of understand or see creators as, I guess, entrepreneurs as well, right? And so, like, a lot of the tools that we see coming out is sort of like recreating the SMB space for the creator universe. And a lot of creators are like, sometimes because they become famous very, very quickly, they're trying to like grow into this thing. And so there's a lot of discomfort. It's not necessarily their preferred thing to do, but I guess what is that distinction now, and how do you think about sort of the space generally speaking relative to like that evolution?
I think similarly to what you saw in many other entertainment forms, you see with the creator space, where you inevitably have to become a full service media company and a jack of all trades. It used to be once upon a time, all you had to do was play guitar, and that meant being a musician. But eventually it meant that you had to make music videos, create merchandise, run social media channels, become a stage performer, become a television star maybe. And you had to add on all these other disciplines. And I think that's happening with creators too. You don't want to be locked and pigeonholed into one medium. So you want to be able to operate across text, across audio, across short form video, long form video. You want to be able to have multiple monetization streams, being a multi-SKU creator, as they say, as Hunter Walk coined. The idea that you're not just doing one thing, you don't just make money one way, but you maybe sell your influence through brand deals and advertising. You sell memberships to exclusive content. You sell physical items like goods or experiences and tickets to things. You're diversifying across all these different streams because every creator has some people who are just absolute fanatics, who are effectively cult followers of their brand and of the content that they make. And more creators need to think about ways to hyper monetize that short head of their biggest fans rather than just sort of nickel and diming a mass audience. You can actually often make more and be happier and have a much tighter relationship with your fans if you're working across mediums and offering some big ticket items that really give a once in a lifetime experience with your fans. So yeah, I think every creator has to be a CEO, and that's why I think a lot of them are also starting to find COOs, which we might have used to think of as being managers, but creators aren't just talent. They are the heads of their own companies. And so I think rather than thinking of creators needing managers, they need partners who can take as much of the logistics and operations work out of their job as possible so they can focus on just doing what they really love, which is creating, doing what only they can do.
So Josh, can you tell us a little bit more about your thesis in terms of how you invest? Like, I remember a few months ago, you announced, SignalFire announced that you invested in Spore. We had Antonio Gary Jr. on our show. He works in biz dev for Spore. Great guy. We learned a lot about the company. And you and I have talked about the Spore as well. But as we've had people on the show as well from other startups, other builders, they kind of all somewhat blend together. And I harken back to the days of reporting where you're like, you get pitched by, hey, we're doing postcards or printable postcards of your memories. You know, you do CVS or whatever, and you're like, okay, how is this different from X, Y, and Z? It's another YC company. It's another 500 startups company. Like, they all start to blend and sound the same. And as a reporter, you're like, okay, I kind of get that. You know, it's like you kind of can pick that winner, the not really a quote unquote winner, but you can find out which one will actually which one has legs. From an investor, you're actually putting money behind it. You're putting resources behind it to help it succeed. How do you look at these startups in that light and figure out, like, this is actually where you think the creator economy is going?
So I think the creator economy is moving so fast. It's evolving so rapidly with whole new mediums springing out of nowhere, new monetization streams rising up, that you need people who are incredibly high horsepower builders who can effectively adapt to the changes, pivot in real time as new opportunities emerge. Those are the kind of startups that we really like to fund at SignalFire. And that starts with the founders, people who have deep domain expertise. They worked in the space. They hopefully are creators themselves, or they understand these concepts of like how the industry is evolving. And instead of trying to say we're just going to build this one thing, they're going to say we're going to react to the market and build what's needed as we go. And that's why we invested in Austin Hollick from Spore. He's the fastest developer I've ever met. So this guy, such a cool story. Most of the time when you hear about a startup and they pitch you, they send you a pitch deck. Austin didn't do that for Spore. He sent me a full website that he had built for me, for my creator presence, for my Clubhouse show and podcast that he had made without even asking. It was like involuntary. And he just shows me this site. It ends up in my email inbox. I was like, wait, this is amazing. This is exactly the answer to so many of the questions that I've had and the problems that I have as a creator. I want to try this. And that interactivity, that willingness to hustle and try something and you do creative forms of customer acquisition, that really impressed me. And then I was like, hey, this is all great, but podcasts are a thing that's really tough to share right now. When I share my podcast, I have one, like, do I share the iOS link? Do I share like a huge list of 10 links and it's really unwieldy? Like, what's the best way to do it? And he's like, give me a few days. Literally 3 days later, the weekend passes and he sends me constine.club/listen. He built a best-in-class podcast landing page, which made it super easy to find my podcast on every single different app. And so I could use one single link for everything. And that's the kind of high horsepower building that I think is so important. Another great example of this is Carrot, which is a credit card for creators and a set of financial services for creators. You'll think this is funny, but if you're a creator and you go to a bank and you ask for a loan, they're going to ask you, okay, how do you make money? And if you tell them, well, I make money off of videos on the internet, they think you're in pornography. And they will not actually lend to you. It's a huge problem getting financial services for creators. Sometimes they're making millions of dollars, but they don't have traditional credit. They don't have these traditional like invoices or the same way that they might make money, like a normal business would make money, and no one will finance them. And Carrot saw that one of their founders worked at Instagram in the creator program and said, this is like every creator's asking me for working capital. Small businesses have working capital, but creators don't. How do they finance the production of their video shoots or the content they're making until that ad revenue like comes in? And so Carrot made this credit card for creators that makes it super easy for them to charge all of the costs for video editing or production or equipment so that they can keep moving as fast as they can, keep making content until they get paid. And now they're branching. And again, why we love these founders, Will and Eric, is that they adapt. They're now listening to creators and finding all these other ways that they want financial services. They want to learn how to invest. They want to learn how to do banking. They need loan structures and things other than credit cards, and they're building that stuff for them. And it's that willingness to adapt to the market and keep a super close ear to what creators are saying they need. That's what I think makes a company really successful in this space, because it's also nascent. It's also moving so fast that just going by the metrics or just going by the product isn't enough, because who knows what you're going to need tomorrow.
So from your experience, and those that are, you probably gone through a lot of these pitches from entrepreneurs and founders. Are you noticing like or are you noticing a pattern in terms of those that are coming, maybe they're first time founders or serial founders? Are they coming? Do they have a pedigree from like like the Instagram mafia, the YouTube mafia type of from the established social media crowd, that type of legacy? Or are they like just creators themselves? Or are they just like, hey, I'm just this person, I just have this idea? Is there any rhyme or reason at this point, or is it just completely random?
Yeah, I think in general, no matter what you're trying to build, you should be building for yourself as customer number one. And if you're thinking of starting a business, just looking at like, oh, where do I think there's an opportunity isn't enough, because you're really kind of just being exploitative to that opportunity rather than truly understanding it firsthand. And so we typically like to back founders who've been building in the space before, whether they don't necessarily have to have been the founders of companies, but they worked at other companies related to the space. Even if it was something 5-10 years ago before the big creator revolution, if you were working at Netflix or YouTube, you definitely see tons of talent coming out of YouTube and Patreon, Spotify, and some of these companies that worked with more traditional professional creators or artists or entertainers, and then realized that, oh wow, like the creator market is just this new reinvention of this space. So that's definitely one big field, but also creators themselves. We think that creators build for themselves. They understand what problems they have, and similar to creators are also often looking for investors who are creators themselves, who truly understand that part of the market. And so, when you can build a team which has multiple parts of that, where you can have somebody who's built this before at a bigger company or something before, when you have somebody who's done this on the ground, they're actually a creator, they're customer number one. I think those are the kind of people that are being the most successful in the space right now, not just serial entrepreneurs who built a bunch of unrelated companies and are now saying, oh, the creator economy is hot, let me sort of parachute into it. That doesn't really work that well.
Yeah. So this Greg, did we answer that question from Seth?
Yeah. So by the way, Josh, welcome to Zealous. This is the first time we're using it live. This is my startup. But we have questions actually from the audience, and many of them are here in person. So it's like kind of like Clubhouse, but with video. So we're going to bring some of them up to ask their questions.
That's
as well.
Cool.
Yeah, I think actually this question though, I think from Seth though, Josh, was more like, is there opportunity from the creator point of view that you think is sort of being missed right now? So do you think there's things that creators should be thinking about? You being like, say, a journalist in the past as an author or writer, there may be new emergent opportunities maybe for people who are like more oriented around prose, say, right? But obviously video, music, et cetera. So are there new opportunities, maybe with crypto or other social tokens and things like that you think are important for creators to be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off is like own your means of distribution. Whatever type of creation you're doing, don't stay just native to that platform. Be sure that you're building that immutable connection to your audience through by collecting email addresses and phone numbers, which are a lot less mediated than followers on a social network. I think there's always whenever there's a new medium that arises, there are going to be new creators that rise up on top of it. And so I had this happen with me with Clubhouse. I thought Clubhouse had huge potential. I loved the platform in the early days. I ended up being the first journalist invited onto the app. And, to me, the experience was really special. And I said, this is something I'm willing to hitch my horse to. And so I started just creating content more professionally on Clubhouse before that was kind of a normal thing. And so I ended up making the first ever official show on Clubhouse called Press Club, where big speakers and big names from the tech industry talk about the big ideas. We've had Mark Zuckerberg and the CEOs of Shopify, Spotify, Slack, Signal, Substack, Patreon, Cameo, and a ton of other wonderful companies. And what I said to myself was, hey, if this social network grows and I'm making some of the best content on the platform, or the least content that I think appeals to a specific audience, then if the network gets bigger, I will grow on top of it. That basically the tide rises your boat. And so I think it's really important for creators to take those gambles on new mediums, because when somebody joins a new medium or a new app, they are very willing to follow people. They're very generous with their follows. Whereas a few years later, or even just a few months later, after they've followed a ton of people, their feeds have gotten kind of full, they're getting plenty of notifications already, they get a lot more stingy with those follows. And so if you can be on a platform early when people are generous with their follows, it's so much easier to grow. I mean, if you look at a lot of the big media moguls in the world were people who are early to Twitter, and they joined Twitter, and then every other person that joined Twitter, they had the opportunity to follow that person. Whereas if you join after everybody else, they can't follow you when they join the network, which is when they're going to do the most of their following. So I recommend to creators to diversify your content experience and say, is there a new network that I really like that feels natural and a good fit for what I like to make? For me, I never shut up. Like, if you can't tell that already, like, I talk for 5 minutes at a time, no problem. I was like, Clubhouse is my jam, right? So
Paul is listening right now in Clubhouse, Josh. There's about 500 people listening.
Whereas, like, I got a face built for radio. Like, I did not imagine myself being like an Instagram star. Like, that's just not my aesthetic. I don't have it. Yeah. So I would say, pick a network or a medium that feels like you have a natural affinity or a natural skill in, and then work aggressively before other people to make some really high quality content. And then if that network does catch fire, it's going to grow underneath you and rise your boat. And if it doesn't work out, it's usually not that much you've sort of given away. It's not that much work that you put into it, because on these early networks, it's very unprofessionalized. And so people usually, it doesn't take that much to get above the sort of median bar of quality and to make something just a little bit better. But then a few years later, when all the brands get in, when the money shows up, when all the MBAs arrive, that's when it's going to get a lot harder for you to make content that's leagues better than the average.
Do you subscribe to Legion's arguments beliefs?
Yes, I just in general, yes. But
I think it's like she's been at the forefront in terms of saying, like, hey, this is what creators need to own their own platform. It's like all about the decentralization and everything like that. Do you agree? I'm just not like looking for like a fist fight type of thing, but more like, do you agree with her arguments, with what she's saying in principle?
Yeah, I think in general, absolutely. You need to own your means of distribution the same way, because production is distribution for creators. That is your product, is your ability to get it out into the world. If you make a YouTube video and nobody sees it, did you ever really make it? Like, it doesn't matter unless you have that distribution. And those platforms will turn on a dime. I mean, you've seen this over and over with Facebook. They have said, oh, we're going to promote this type of content. Make video, make live video. And then newsrooms hire up these huge staffs to make live video. And then all of a sudden, Facebook's like, I don't think that's actually working. We're moving in a different direction. They drop the funding for it. The newsfeed, like algorithmic, advantage or promotion for that type of content disappears. And suddenly you're just sort of stuck with all this video equipment and staff that you've hired and nobody watching your videos. And so, whereas if you instead of trying to like aggressively grow your Facebook following, if you'd just been collecting your email addresses, nobody can take that away from you. And so I think owning that means of distribution is critical. What I will say though is that convenience for the customer matters. The end audience has to have an easy time being able to consume your content. Clubhouse, it was invite only for a long time. Once you were in, super easy to consume the content. You literally just listen. You don't have to do anything. And I think a lot of the stuff that's existing in the new sort of decentralized Web3 world is often still has very sort of UX that's very much behind the times. You know, whether you have to use complicated passwords and Chrome extensions and MetaMask, and you need to pay gas fees and do all this stuff that is pretty foreign to a lot of people. It's a very daunting, and it makes it a lot harder to grow an audience when the UX isn't there yet. And so I think that's something I think the whole Web3 world needs to think about is, yes, I think the philosophy is there. I think some of the early products that have potential are there. It's about polishing that UX so they can become accessible to the mainstream. You know, if you think Coinbase did that for like Bitcoin and Ethereum, you know, how do you do that for social tokens? How do you do that for staking and governance and DAOs? How do you make it easy for people to participate and kind of push all of the crypto-y stuff, push all of the complicated engineering stuff behind the surface, and just make it easy on the surface. Like, you don't have to know how to make shoes to buy Nikes, and that should be how it is for the Web3 world too.
Yeah. And so why don't we have someone from in our audience join us on stage now? I think we have Abhinav, who has a question for you, Josh. Abhinav, why don't you take it away?
Hey, Josh. Hey, guys. So I guess just running on from the topic we're talking about now, for new founders, for people who are working on for products for the creator economy now, you know, how much of your existence can you really kind of go full tilt on? You know, we're building for creators. We want to allow decentralization, more control. How do you, and as for a startup, you're already kind of nervous as you're building something. You're going to see how it's interact with the whole world. How do you measure how much you go full throttle on the Web3 stuff as you're building, as you're trying to refine your product market fit? You know, you're trying to see how your user experience is becoming stable, how that part is being refined, and then managing that with with the big wide world of Web3. What advice would you give to founders dealing with that balance now?
I think it's so important for founders to have effectively a creator in residence. If you don't have a founder who is a creator, who has, 100,000 followers somewhere, who can really test things at scale, you probably don't truly know what the creators want. Or if you're not on phone calls all day long, talking to creators, asking them what their problems are, that you're not going to be in touch with what they need. And so I think that's the biggest part, is just, getting out of the building and talking to the people who you're actually building for is by far the number one thing. And the second is just sort of dropping some of the philosophy and stop worrying about Web3 as a concept or like a movement, and just think about solving needs. And sometimes those, Web3 tools and functionality will apply. You'll say, oh, that's exactly what they needed. They needed a solution to the chicken and egg problem where token economics can really help. If you're saying we have a two-sided marketplace where we need, like something like a music streaming service, you need creators and you need listeners, but the creators don't want to join if there's no listeners, and the listeners don't want to join if there's no creators. How do you solve this problem? Audius, a blockchain-based music startup, they solved this by saying, we're going to give tokens to early creators who are willing to take the time to upload their content and make a presence on our app. And then if they help make this app more successful, their tokens will become worth more, and they'll sort of share in the benefits. And so I think, it was more that they needed an answer to the problem than that they started with the philosophy. So I definitely say, get rid of your orthodoxy about Web3 and just solve problems.
A question for you real quick, actually, if I can add just a follow-up there. How instructive, Matt Zavello, one of our other friends, a regular on the show, we were sort of commenting, like, how instructive or do you think like the 1% sort of the top tier are relative to, I guess, the 99% of emerging creators? And how do you like, I get having a creator in residence, but it seems like you need an army of them kind of scattered across sort of the spectrum to be successful. What are your thoughts? Because it feels like the needs are highly divergent once you're a celebrity status.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need like effectively an advisory board, not just one creator in residence, but a few people across the verticals that you're tackling, the mediums that you're tackling. If you're building for Twitch stars, don't just have gaming Twitch stars, have just talking Twitch stars and other types as well. Make sure that you're getting a broad understanding of what those creators want in your space. And be willing to sacrifice equity to do that. And I think a lot of founders, their first times around, will hold their equity super tight to the chest, saying like, I want to own this thing, and if it succeeds, I want to reap all the benefits. But you realize that most startup results and outcomes are binary. You either succeed and it gets really big, or you fail. There's not a lot in the middle, and the venture world is kind of built for that same reason. They want things to either get really big or fail. Returning your money 1 or 2x is not interesting. And so because of that, founders need to think of like, hey, it's better for me to own a smaller piece of a bigger pie than to own all of a pie nobody wants to eat. It's better to own 50% of something that's worth $1 billion than 80% of something worth 0. It's like it's much better to give away that equity and find those kind of advisors and people who can lead you on the right path that can open those big questions. And the other thing I'll say on that is that the fact is that the majority of the money in the space and the opportunity is in that top 1% or the top 10%. It's, yes, there are going to be millions and millions of creators. And yes, that's an amazing thing for society. Great way to be self-actualized. I think everyone should find some medium in which they can be a creator, but they're probably not going to all become huge businesses. And so building something that kind of earns a tiny bit off of a huge number of creators, especially if it's proportional to their revenues, is going to probably be less successful than something that really solves a big need for, even if it earns just a small percentage of the earnings of huge creators. And so we've seen most of the most successful startups in the creator space are really focused on those big creators. And there's the added benefit of the aspirational model. If you recruit the biggest creators, the smaller creators will want to join. They will think that your platform is trustworthy. It will have been validated by their own heroes, and people are a lot more likely to trust you. So I would recommend locking down a few big name creators who can truly help you build in your process, give you feedback on what you're building, and then eventually you can expand into the long tail. But starting with the long tail is hard, both because it's hard to build functionality for so many people, incredibly hard to do customer acquisition on the long tail if you don't have sort of brand recognition and just like people are just self-serve signing up for you. You want to get some of that success with people that are role models first.
Awesome. Abhinav, I hope we got an answer for you.
Yeah, great clarity. Thank you.
You bet. I'm going to bring up Martin next, if that's okay. Martin, you're ready. I know you had a question as well earlier. I'll bring it up for you here.
Hello. Yeah. Oh. Hi, Josh. Hi, Ken. Hi, Greg.
Hello.
Yeah. So basically, I love the SignalFire creator economy map thing. And I, like many of these other maps, it's set up by vertical. So I was wondering how you would organize it thematically.
I mean, thematically, I think it's more about the concept of like, are you helping people with something rather than just saying like by vertical, saying like, oh, you make financial services, what problems do you solve? But I think that really market mapping exercises are great ways to get a broad understanding of a space, but people get too caught up in like the exact ways the logos are laid out and exactly what categories everything are in. Honestly, when we made this creator economy market map, and for anybody who's writing about the creator economy or any intellectual pursuit, what people care about is, a few big pieces of research or like citations or stats that they can use to back up their own arguments. They want a few frameworks for understanding all the new information that they process about this concept. And then they want a few specific insights that are kind of like a talking point that they could tell somebody about. So, for our creator economy market map, that was that there are 50 million creators that we're moving through these phases of the creator economy. That's the lens or the framework. And then the insights were that, creators are becoming founders and that people are trying to own their means of distribution. So I think whenever you can focus more on those insights than like the specifics of how the verticals are laid out. But I do think, what I'll say is more interesting is that what are the new major spaces that I think have really come up in the past year? I think audio is obviously a huge one. Suddenly there's a ton of startups all trying to like build something similar to Clubhouse. Generally, I think you don't win by being a little better, having one extra feature that a major network already has, because you have to overcome incredible network effect. There's enormous inertia in these platforms, and people aren't likely to join another network to do what they're already doing on an existing network just to add one little feature, or to be able to do it without ads, or to do it with a better UX, or to add one little thing. That doesn't, we've never seen that. 100 startups have tried to make Facebook, but with some little tweak, and it never works. The things that did, like with the social networks that we have seen arise since Facebook, are things like Twitter, which was focused on very short form text, a significant constraint. And it was about sort of information density and speed. Or Snapchat, which was much more visually focused, visual communication rather than through traditional text status updates. Or things like TikTok, where it was really about the composition and the feed and the way that you discover content being not based on who you follow, but by just who it recommends based on your existing patterns. So you need a big difference to build a new network, not a small little change, and in order to overcome this network effect. So I think that's one big space. And then the next big ones we're seeing are augmented reality and the metaverse, gaming in the metaverse, avatars, I think is going to be a hugely important space here. And then I think the financial services sector for creators is exploding in potential. Companies like Carrot are really having a ton of success because there are so many creators now that they need those financial services that are largely already been built for small businesses, but nobody has bothered to translate into what creators specifically need.
So Josh, I wanted to follow up on that with like two parts. One, I'm curious, is your SignalFire report, are you going to make it the equivalent of a Mary Meeker state of the internet type of report, where we're going to start to see more type of things?
There's more coming.
we are going to continue to update it. We're going to run some stats again. We're going to find some new insights. We're going to identify some new verticals. So keep your eyes peeled to that report. We'll add some updates there. But yeah, I mean, it's been amazing seeing it show up in pitch decks, get cited by the New York Times over and over again. So yeah, if you want to check it out, just search creator economy. It's usually the first or second Google result, or just search SignalFire creator economy. You'll find it, and there's a ton to learn about the future of the creator space.
Awesome.
And what would you say? I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to bring Brent up because he had a question related to Josh's stages as well.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hey Josh, nice to meet you, man. Super excited with everything you've been bringing up today. Just generally in the context of this phase-based model, phase 3 versus phase 4, as we're seeing creators transition. And then also in the context of helping creators, the best creators are going to be the ones that are going to drive their users to have the best type of experience. What are your thoughts on templatized apps and a lot of creators leveraging those versus moving more towards web-based applications?
So there's definitely big advantages of building for the web. I think forever we've seen people try to build sort of specialty apps for creators or networks of apps for creators. But the problem is that oftentimes when people are coming into these apps, they're not fully invested. They're not fully cult members of that creator yet. And so if you try to get somebody to download a full native app and install it and register and all of that, that's a lot of work, especially if you're still kind of top of funnel. And so I think that, and meanwhile, you have to deal with the tax issues. I mean, Apple is finally starting to have its iron grip on payments wrestled from it through all of these lawsuits and regulations. But I still think, if you're building on native apps, you're going to end up paying big platform taxes. And that's why I really liked Spore's approach, and why SignalFire invested in Spore, is that they build for the web. And we know that the web is not going anywhere. Like, the mobile app ecosystems may change, taxes and regulations will change, but the web is still going to be there. It's so easy for users to be able to experience. You can make it like your Spore website, a replacement for your link tree. And as soon as people are a little bit curious about you, they go to your website instead of your link tree. And instead of just clicking through to another social network and you get another mediated, algorithmically divided follower, you get the actual contact information of somebody. Because a lot of these social networks, similarly, they don't want you to collect contact information of your fans, because they know that means you can cut those social networks out of the value chain. And so they want them to follow you on the app rather than actually give you that contact information, which is so much more valuable. So I think building for the web for that reason makes it super easy for fans to get a taste of it. They don't have to download anything to get used to it. You don't have to pay any taxes, and you're completely free to run the product however you want. And that means collecting contact information so you have a permanent connection to your fans long term. So that's why I think the web is so powerful right now, and why I hope to see more things built there. The one thing that is really valuable from native apps is push notifications, but already Android has browser-based push notifications, and I think that's something we'll hopefully see Apple coerced into building as well for iOS.
So are you going to see this renewed push to kind of go back, with this? I think it was years ago we went from web to HTML5 to sorry, not HTML5. Then we went to native web, native apps, and now it's mobile first. And are we going to now switch that back and revert to web first or mobile web first?
Yeah, I mean, HTML5 has gotten a lot better. The browsers have gotten a lot better at adapting to it. And so where it was circa 2012 when Facebook wanted to, cut out the app stores and build its own HTML5 game ecosystem, the games just couldn't run. And I still think that some like AAA style games are not going to run on HTML5 ever. You're going to need big native apps that you download big files beforehand in order to play. But if you're trying to do something as simple as just like convey content, run a chat room, show videos, have people read your newsletter, listen to audio content, you don't need a native app for that. There's nothing super graphically intense or hyper interactive about that. And so I think you're totally fine building this on the web. And so I think we're going to see increasingly communities built on the web where it's much easier to get fans in the door.
I've got a follow-up question to that too. Just in terms of these phase 4 companies that are coming out that are kind of, bringing all of these different services together, do you foresee that there's going to be a web-based app store, like a web application store, where you're going to be able to plug in these different types of like quote unquote digital products that you're essentially enabling creators to leverage? Do you see that that's like a company like Spore? You see like Koji doing this as well. Like, is that where you see all of this is going? And is there going to be a collective ecosystem amongst companies that are serving different types of needs?
Developer ecosystems are inevitable because there's just no way for any one company to build all of the functionality needed by the incredibly broad and diverse space of creators with so many different mediums, with so many different sets of topics and interests. There's just no way for you to build the best product for every single creator unless you activate an army of developers to help you with that. And so I think similar to how we saw, Facebook knew it couldn't be the end all be all of social networking. It needed game companies to help augment its web canvas, things like Zynga that emerged, the same way that we saw Apple knew that it couldn't make every app in the world, and man, the apps it does make are pretty awful. So like probably shouldn't even be making those core apps, but that the developers really filled in the holes. I think we're going to see that for creators as well, that platforms like Spore can evolve into developer platforms where anybody can build plugins that other creators can use and maybe even earn a cut of the revenue that those creators make with those plugins, so that you turn developers into the next form of creators.
That's super
Awesome.
interesting.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Brent. We'll have you back in a little bit, I'm sure. We did have some other questions. Ken, did you have any other questions? I also had some questions as well.
Well, Greg, why don't you go ahead? And I have one deep philosophical question for Josh. We can wait till later on. But Greg, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So let me just find one of the ones that I've got here. Yeah, so the 50 million, the stats that you guys use, it's in my investor deck. I think it's in everyone's investor deck out there, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, and well, I had a couple questions related to this. I guess, like, how big do you think it really is, though? I guess that, that's sort of like you guys backed into that
bigger
number.
now.
But, yeah. But
well, this was, we ran those stats right. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, we ran these stats right at the early part of the pandemic. And when millions of people were suddenly stuck at home all the time, when people didn't have the kind of beautiful, entertaining lives to go out and sort of do life logging, the kind of content you see commonly on Instagram, suddenly people are like, well, I got to be home. I may as well like make something. So I might write a skit or write an essay or something or create a course. And so I think you saw an explosion of the number of creators over the past year and a half, in part due to the pandemic, because people had more time on their hands. They were stuck home. There was less fun stuff to do. They couldn't hang out with their friends. So they're kind of just stuck at home with their phones and their cameras. And so I think people are making a lot more. So I think the overall size of the space has likely massively increased. You're also starting to see things like these creator funds where TikTok and Facebook and Snapchat have started to, in a desperate attempt to keep creators from leaving their platforms, they're starting to offer these bounties and subsidies and rewards to creators directly, which means that a ton of new people can become creators that weren't before. And you're also seeing really intelligent systems where platforms are realizing that some people could be part-time creators or contribute content that's worth monetizing, but they don't want to build their own presence by themselves. And I love what Quora did with this. Quora is the Q&A site, 300 million users. And what they did was they said, yes, you can make your own subscription Quora space where you can do Q&A that only your subscribers answer or can see, or you can contribute questions to Quora Plus, which is a one overarching subscription. And if people view your content when they're subscribers, then you get a cut of that revenue, similar to how Spotify works, where you get sort of revenue in proportion to how much time people spend consuming your content. And I think that that's amazing because there's a lot of people out there with so much to contribute to the world, but they don't have the full-time energy to be able to build a following from scratch, or maybe that's just not their vibe. Like, some people are great creators at a specific medium, but they hate doing the song and dance of like getting everyone to subscribe to them, and those platforms being able to step in and help them with that, I think is a big advantage. And so because of that, the creator total volume of the space is massively increasing. And I think brands are finally truly waking up that like their display ads, we're all so blind to them. We just have numbness and we look right past them. And that oftentimes celebrities, these big names that we used to have as the endorsers of products, people have so little connection with them, because when I think of the difference between a celebrity and a creator, it's that celebrities have a one-way relationship with their fans. They make movies, they make TV shows, they talk to the press, and that's the only way that they interact with fans. Whereas creators have a two-way relationship. They're actually taking feedback directly from their fans. They're reading their replies, they're reading their DMs, and they're making content in response to that. It's a much tighter feedback loop, and it means that the fans feel like they have a deeper sense of ownership and affiliation with those creators, and they're a lot more persuasive for that reason. And so I think you see the rise of nano influence, where it's like, I would rather listen to somebody who only has 10,000 followers or even 1,000 followers, but like make something that I truly love that's just for me, than like listen to what Tom Cruise wants me to buy.
By the way, one last programming note: if you do have questions, if you're watching inside Zella Studio, put it in the question bar on the side. If you're on Clubhouse, just send me a DM and I'll try to get to that question. Ken, maybe I do see Arnold is also here, and Ryan. I don't know if they had questions that they wanted to also go to, but shoot us a message in the chat if you want. Ken, did you want to go to your question?
Yeah, quick question, quick philosophical question here, Josh. You kind of brought this up in terms of the competing with the big social networks because they have like this large network effect, right? So you see you look at Clubhouse in particular, and it's pretty easy for people to pick on it, but it's kind of really been one of the pioneers of this social audio space, right? But then you kind of see the success of Clubhouse, and then you see everyone dogpiling on it. You have like Spotify, you have Twitter, you have Facebook, LinkedIn is theoretically doing something like that. All these other companies are doing
Slack and Discord also have launched products in the space.
Exactly, which I don't know why, but sure. But it kind of can feel overwhelming. Can feel like as for creators and for builders, like, why do this? Because you're just going to get swamped by these big companies. So, and there's plenty of opportunities for success to separate yourself. So what would you tell developers or builders who are like who come to pitch you for money and like, hey, I'm doing this, it's service X, Y, and Z, but then only to realize that Mark Zuckerberg's gonna be like, hey, all right, that sounds cool. We can do that in like in a hackathon.
I would be much more worried about there being a native player to the space that has built their own community dedicated to that content medium, the way that Clubhouse is, than about these big social networks trying to like glom onto these spaces. It's one thing if it's very close to their core competency. If you think of like Instagram stories to what Instagram was, it's very similar. It's just maybe higher frequency, a little bit more off the cuff, but it's effectively the exact same kind of content that was in the feed. And that's why Instagram was able to steal it from Snapchat Snapchat because Instagram had already built the interest graph around that kind of visual content. And it was easy for people to say, hey, I already have my social graph here. I don't want to rebuild a social graph on Snapchat. I'll just use Instagram stories. But it's totally different when you're talking about a completely separate medium like audio versus text. Yes, I think Twitter is going to be able to have some success with Twitter Spaces, but I think there's always going to be room for a dedicated platform for that medium where you're not competing with the rest of the products for attention on the homepage or notification load or your engineer and product team's time. You're going to want, there's the teams that are dedicated to the medium specifically, I think are going to move faster. And so to those creators and those entrepreneurs out there, I would say, go find the new medium. I think the meme space still has tons of opportunity. I think the educational space still has plenty of room. I think there's a lot of different subcultures and things that we spend our time doing that still don't have social networks built for them. Go build something like that, build a new medium and build a new social graph. Don't just try to rebuild a product with a little bit of a feature add-on to something that already has a thriving community. It's really hard to break those community bonds.
Greg?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree. I'm trying to figure out, I guess still, our show has I think a decent amount of creators, but also a lot of tech founders and builders trying to build into the space. And I think there's still a lot of glue missing. You're absolutely right.
There definitely is. There's so much room. There's still we're still in the early innings, to say the least. You are not late to this movement. There's still opportunity, whether you're trying to be a creator or be a builder. I think there's tons of opportunities. And yeah, if you're building something in that space, we would love to hear about it at SignalFire. We help our companies with recruiting. It can be really nice to take that off your plate as a founder and get back to building your product. So if that's something that's useful, definitely hit us up. But thank you guys so much for having me on the show today. This has been amazing.
No, thank you,
Josh. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we hope to have you back on the show again. And when you have the new report, please send it our way. We would love to take a look at it. Everyone, for more information about Josh, follow him on Twitter at Josh Constine. Follow him at Constine.club. Subscribe to his podcast as well, his Press Club podcast, and check him out on SignalFire. Anything else?
I am everywhere.
He's everywhere.
You cannot escape me on the internet. So yeah, with Press Club in your podcast favorite, go to join my Substack, my Twitter, my Clubhouse, whatever. And please give me feedback, because as a creator, we thrive on feedback. I want to know what you want me to make, what you want me to write about, what you want me to talk about, who you want me to interview. So please, my DMs are always open. Slide right in.
We super appreciate it, Josh. Thank you so much,
Josh.
We'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Farewell. And thanks again for having me. And thanks to everyone for watching The Created Economy today.
Thank you. Bye. Well, everyone, there's no need to go. We have a lot of our friends, and we're going to just do After Dark right now in here. So everyone is welcome back on stage. If you'd like to join the conversation, just to let me know in the chat, and you're able to come on up.
What about those on Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces?
If you are on Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, and you want to raise your hand, I will add you up to the stage as well, and you can listen in or contribute to the conversation. But what'd you guys think? Any reactions, feedback? By the way, I want to thank my co-founder Peter we pushed to deploy like 2 minutes before we went live, so we can get those questions to work. And everything sort of worked. We just didn't stream the Ken's channel, but who cares?
Wow.
Welcome, Arnold. I was trying to get you up here for a question. Eileen, let me see if you're free. Steven, if you're free. I saw you guys had some good comments as well. But so yeah, what'd you guys think? What were your key takeaways from today's conversation?
I mean, he sounds so much like Marshall McLuhan.
Funny enough, this was one where I actually didn't have a question. It was just so much info I was kind of digesting. It was really good. The one thing that really resonated with me is something I've been actually thinking about is this idea of like an equity fund for creators that you bring onto your platform, right? So, it's something that I've been kind of like high level starting to think about. Is it the most active creators that bring on the most folks and giving me the most feedback, basically find that level of value and then give them some incentive to continue to not only heavily use the platform, but go out and champion it and tell other people too. so, and ultimately they succeed when we succeed. So I don't know, like that kind of came up, and that really made my ears perk up, because that's I think that's a pretty cool concept.
Would you do it? I've thought about this too, actually. I'm curious if other founders here have thought about this, like some kind of, like an advisory board with a stock allocation or option grants, or like, has anyone considered this already?
Yeah, it's very much how we're trying to stay grounded, and how we give people a stake in the in what we're building, and it's also in our favor, because they're telling us what we should be doing. So absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, one thing, I don't know if you've gotten to this point yet, Avinath, but like I was even trying to think, like, how do you make this, like, how do you make it I guess big enough we can have enough people in it, but also worthwhile, right? Because like if it gets too small, if you get like some 0.000% of then it's like when you have an exit, then you get just a couple grand or something. Maybe it's not worth it. I don't know. This is me getting way in the weeds. I've been kind of just, I don't know if you've given it even that level of thought.
I think the even related is also like Fanbase, for example, did a equity crowd raise, right? Or sorry, like a crowdfunding as well as part of the process, right? So I think these things are all potentially part of the mix, no? Right? Like of things that you could put together. I guess you can't really optimize on, I mean, in general, like when you recruit early employees, you don't sort of say, hey, you're going to be a millionaire because you're going to get these options in our company, right? Like, right. I think you want to win on all the other value points before like the monetary sort of value first, right? Unless, of course, your product is helping monetize, then obviously maybe there's other ways to participate there.
Just having a say, right? Especially at the early stage, when you bring creators on and they're like, oh, I can tell you what I like and don't like, and like there's a regular forum for that, and they see you taking action, like that in itself, is going to be, you're already monetized for the most on another side. But yeah, that in itself is a big thing. But overall, the Zealous was great, worked really well. Yeah, nice. And the show was great. I think that was one of my favorite ones. He had some really snappy, like, lot of like clear advice, but just very pragmatic, very, very good.
Yeah. Well, they were very formative, I think, in putting a shape to the space, right? I think Legion has done a tremendous amount of work, just very, very early passion economy and sort of shaping sort of like, the conversation. But I think what Josh's work did that was really, I think important and helpful was it started to get some size, right? And some context to it, because I think a lot of times, probably all of us here out trying to raise money, trying to like justify sort of like to our partners and spouses why we should spend our time working on this stuff, right? And, I think we've seen, finally having some numbers and someone like with credibility sort of shaping and providing sort of guardrails or horizon at least, pretty useful, like in terms of just starting to understand it. And my key takeaway, I think Josh's was really, on point here. The 50 million is just the start, right? Like if you look at like what Lee has said often at times about like how big is the creator economy, the creator economy is not the stuff that happens on YouTube alone per se, right? It's education, it's coaching, it's products, it's several spheres of like commerce ultimately, right? That I think are all contributing, and there's a lot of budgets to pull from ultimately in terms of creating sort of a bigger future for all creators. And Clubhouse as well with monetization, Twitter with spaces and monetization. I think all of these things are really, really powerful concepts that provide a lot more opportunity for creators, more people to consider themselves creators and enter the fray ultimately.
Absolutely. And I would just want to add to that too, as he was talking about it expanding from 50 million, we've always contextualized that as like, okay, there's this middle class that needs to be served and we need to figure out how it's going to work. And the way that he framed it actually changed my framing, where it's like, you don't necessarily have to teach those individuals that aren't able to figure out how to market themselves and turn themselves into real businesses. The opportunity is that the market itself is growing and getting bigger, and talent is going to continue to funnel in. So it's not necessarily that you have to move the needle for the individuals that are sitting in that, that middle section, but that there's going to be more talent. It's going to rise up and it's going to continue to grow. It's this concept of the wave that's continuing to move on, is now going to be infused with more talent. And I think that there's opportunities for individuals that may not necessarily think of themselves as creators, but have a little bit more business acumen to be able to become a much greater part of the creator economy and look at themselves as say, hey, I actually am a creator, and this is actually how I'm going to drive the continued growth of this market. So I thought that was really unique. I hadn't thought about it that way before. So
your question was really good also, Brent. I thought just about the more the developer ecosystem, and you know, there, like, I know Koji just released, for example, a couple of these like collaborative projects, right? Like, and ultimately, like, they're creating a space where developers are building this universe that Josh kind of described of thousands of micro apps that can kind of better fit and service all those minutia and different like little micro prototypes of creators, right?
Yeah, it's cyclical. You think about it, it's like creators are becoming more niche, and then now there's developers that are out there that are actually designing things specifically for those niches. I think that flywheel effect is going to make sure that the end user experience is going to be better for everyone.
Yeah. John, welcome to the stage, my friend.
Hey, what's up, Craig? Sorry, I'm extremely late. I think I probably missed some of the action there.
You missed the Josh part.
Sorry, I just got your email.
Oh, no, all good. I appreciate it. I mailed
It
you
looks
kind of
amazing.
late. Thanks, man. It's all on YouTube anyway, so you can just watch it later. But we're just chatting and reflecting back on the conversation that we just had with Josh.
Yeah. Josh's a good dude. Smart guy.
Yeah, for sure. Any last closing thoughts, Martin? Did you get to, you know, I know you asked, I think your question was really important because it sort of points out kind of the thing we were alluding to, which is that there's high degrees of convergence still because there is no winner yet, right? Like, we don't have a Salesforce as a backbone that everyone's like, great, let's just integrate against Salesforce. You know, like like if you're in a CRM, if you're building a business solution, you get Salesforce, you get HubSpot, and maybe Sugar CRM, and basically you cover like 90% of the market, right? If you're doing CRM in a creator space, who would you integrate against? I mean, Pico's out there, but you know, there's only a couple. So everyone's got it. Like, we all have a little lightweight CRM probably in our tools to some degree. We all have a little lightweight buffer publishing tool in our thing. We all have a little bit of lightweight monetization in our tools, right? There isn't yet a clear winner that for any of us to say, I can wait / build against someone yet.
Just wait till November next year, Dreamforce, where Mark Benioff or Brett Taylor will get on stage and announce the Creator Cloud, this new thing, a new Salesforce installment specifically for creators, on which platforms such as whether it's Clubhouse or whether it's Zealous or Highbeam or you know, Garden or all these other companies will all be integrated with, and it'll be absolutely perfect.
It probably will be too.
I mean, at this point, the way that these big tech companies are kind of like looking and observing what's going on in the creator space, I think that's probably logical. And I think there's bound to be smart people at Salesforce who are observing what's going on here and saying like, hey, if these creators want to be businesses and they're doing a lot of support for small businesses, why not kind of leverage that capability leverage Salesforce for that?
Well, Ken,
makes sense.
Here's what I would contest, I guess, right? One, I think it's harder. I think creator businesses are harder than SMBs even, right? Because at least most SMBs are out on a mission knowing they are a business, want to be a business, are trying to be in business, right? There's a more well-worn path, right? Like an acceptance, ultimately in the model. Hey, Stephen. Right. So I think the SMB creator business thing has some catching up to do. There's probably too much of a delta right now in the between the sensibilities that are there. Not that we can't get there and we won't get there, right? But if you think about it, think about all of the ingenuity that's actually being applied. Oh, hey, Francine. Let me quick plus here. All the ingenuity being applied to all of these smart people on stage to try to solve these problems. I absolutely think Salesforce will probably have capabilities in this arena, but it's going to take likely a bunch of effort from us. Right. Here's the other thing that I will argue that I honestly didn't anticipate was how fast the platforms moved to defend themselves, right? Like that part was truly surprising to me. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that. I just didn't think like a Facebook was going to move that fast or Twitter was going to move that fast. to
But
sort of.
that was my question to Josh at the very end, because I'm kind of curious because, and look, I have a soft spot for Clubhouse because I've chatted with Paul back in the day when he was with
I was
Highlight and
listening right
everything like
now.
that.
So
I know, it's like, hey Paul, nice little cheap plug. Hi Paul. But no, I think I think when you look at a lot of these companies, to your point, Greg, is like, sure, you see Clubhouse and all these other companies like Linktree and Lincoln Bio, Koji, all these other companies that are coming out with like, hey, we're building specifically for the creators or building this new medium. And then you look at these, big brothers, like, you know what? Squash that. We're just going to roll it out. And I think to what I took away from Josh's point is like, these big tech companies don't necessarily have that DNA, right? That foundation, that essence of what it is to be a creator. Sure, like Facebook has that, creator side with like Instagram and everything like that. But like when you're building it from the ground up, that's at the core, as opposed to just traditional like Web 2.0 type of, social media stuff. So I think that's kind of an interesting point. But
by the way, I would just go to Steven. Steven, welcome. One of our friends from Facebook, actually, on the live streaming buddy compatriot. I know you were listening in intently. Did you hear anything interesting as a creator in our universe here? Any thoughts or reflections?
Yeah, I was just taking it all in. I'm a baby creator, so I'm just getting into the space really. So, but a lot of the information was right on point. I was taking notes, and I'm going to be doing a lot of research. So I'm glad I tuned in, and I'm really digging Zealous right now. I'm just really, I'm thinking about this a lot.
I appreciate that. Well, we're super excited to hear that. By the way, I saw Francine. I saw you unmute, but I didn't hear anything. Can you? Do you want to try again? Oh, still on mute.
there she is.
But when I started speaking the last time, Stephen spoke, and I don't see a Stephen in the
Oh,
room.
sorry, Francine. We're also live streaming in Zealous at the same time.
I thought I was going to get to try Zealous. Okay, so anyway, these creators are going to need a hell of a lot of coaching on how to make their businesses into businesses, and they're also going to find out that it's an awful lot of hard work. The ones that have been on there, on say TikTok and YouTube, and for a long time, are burned out. And if you listen to them talk behind the scenes, they are very burned out because they are dealing with both the business aspect and the creative aspect of what they're doing. And they feel like they're on a tremendous treadmill. And as creators, I mean, not creators like us, Greg, or like me, because we've been creators for long enough so that we understand that you have to run your business. But as the younger creators come in, I think that is either going to change the nature of creator tools. I want a back end set of things to tell me whether the creators I'm following are doing well or not well on Rally. So there's a bunch of things like that need to be developed. This is a big wholesale change, and Facebook isn't going to have time to deal with it because they have existential issues right now.
Oh yeah, Brent, good to see you. Kamar, I did see you were also there, and I know you wanted to chime in from the Clubhouse side. Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the space.
I hope I said your name right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you got it right. All good. What I wanted to say was to a comment that was made earlier around, developers almost becoming creators themselves. That was certainly something, that I had a lot of experience with because I was a super user of Clubhouse, and using Clubhouse and hearing, this grassroots, hey, we want these features. Hey, we want X. We should have this. And being someone that was capable of creating, I started to get into creating a lot of auxiliary apps from, custom bio bots and all types of things. What was interesting was that, when I tried out Twitter Spaces, I also did exactly the same thing. I became a user. One of the early users, understood what the users wanted, and then pretty much started to build the features before Twitter Spaces got to them. That actually ended up to me building their first hallway because Spaces had no hallway. And interestingly enough, the Twitter Spaces team actually, almost reached out and essentially worked with me on that hallway, because it was so interesting, because they were like, hey, you're getting all this data directly from the core users that we're looking at to build Twitter Spaces around. Let's do this thing together. So I had a super interesting experience where I was a user or a creator, because I was creating rooms, and then I decided to kind of really elevate by actually utilizing the skills I had to build things. And it was very interesting how the community themselves were ripe for that, to a point where they actually wrapped their arms around me and said, hey, let's do this together. So that was super interesting.
For sure, yeah, and I think both of you are making really important points, which is that this is a highly collaborative effort, right? I think, much like we need customer success, we need creator success folks sort of everywhere in the process, right? Because we're advising, in a lot of ways, you're advising up someone into many different things, right? Being a better creator, being a better community manager, being a better business person, right? Like these are multiple things, and to some degree, potentially being better product developers, PMs or et cetera in the process. So a lot of interesting opportunities here. But I do think it is what makes it complex. And trust me, I've had my share of like frustrations when like roadmap and things don't ship fast enough in every product I've ever used. So, and as someone building a product, we know like it's hard. It's hard to react. And I think Josh's point was that it almost does take an army of developers to get to where you want to go, right? Like all of us can only accomplish so much in our part of the journey. It's why I like collaborating with so many other founders, because like we all have, parts that can contribute ultimately to the future. Well, gang, I do appreciate everyone being here. It's going on 4:30. We've been here for an hour and a half. And this has just been, honestly, like I couldn't even sleep last night because I was like wigging out about like running all this today. So, Francine, did you have one last thing?
Yeah, I want to ask how you're going to fix whatever it is on Zealous that doesn't show Kenny. It shows him here and doesn't show him as unmuting when he speaks.
There is nothing I can do about that, unfortunately, because unless Paul knows better, but I have to route my audio from my computer in through my microphone input. And so even though I do have Ken here, we're both on Agora, by the way, Paul. So like if I can somehow push you the audio stream, I'm happy to. But yeah, unfortunately, it has to pipe through a common user for this to work.
Well, that must be a product feature that Clubhouse needs to build. It definitely has to be a feature, because if people are going to do what I see that they're all doing lately, which is streaming from several places at once, that has to be made possible.
Well, that brings up an interesting question. And while we have the platform here, and Paul and Steph are in the audience from Clubhouse, I wanted to kind of reach out and say, hey, as we talk about the future of Clubhouse in terms of the like creators and the platforms, we'd love to have you both on our show to talk about that. So slide into our DMs, hit us up, please. love to catch up and chat, Paul and Steph.
There's lots of possibility for sure. Yeah. I think Francine, by the way, but I as I was saying, and Kamar, I saw you on mute, so if you wanted to add something also, but I definitely know like our use case is probably a small use case, obviously, relative to the ecosystem. So I'm sure there are probably many competing priorities at the same time. Kamar, did you have something?
That was
I was just piggybacking on what you said in terms of I'm also kind of curious in terms of what the platform's policy is, with these developers building on top of their platforms. I know Twitter was super interesting because they opened their arms to me, and I was just like, I never heard an official statement from Clubhouse, so I've always wondered what what their take was. If they were too early for that type of stuff, never knew.
Well, Paul,
I think Clubhouse is probably early. Paul has left.
Yeah. Oh, Francine was saying something.
Yeah, I said Paul has left the room, so now we'll never know. Or maybe,
It's fine.
go
Well,
back.
what? I'm sorry, Francine. I'm interrupting.
Oh, sorry, Francine. Could you repeat?
I said maybe Paul went back to work on that feature. But see, I think that what's going to happen with a lot of this audio is that creators are going to have the opportunity. It's really bad now because we stream our Karma Club to call in, and it has all these same problems. So, but call in has some virtues the Clubhouse doesn't have. It immediately becomes a podcast, and you can have highlights. So these platforms have different strengths for creators, and either everybody has to build everything, or and here's where my lack of development experience is going to come in, or we have to learn how to do APIs and just connect to each other.
Well, I got a room full of developers here to help in any way we can. All right, everyone. This was been a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for also helping out. Just in case you don't remember, there is a coin drop for AMA. We will tweet a link out to it in case you missed it, though. So feel free to come by and grab some free AMA on me. And everyone who asked a question, I'll also send a little bonus AMA as well. But thank you all for participating. Martin, I know it's up super late for you, but we appreciate you being here as well, all the way from Amsterdam. Did you get to meet Hugo, by the way, for dinner?
No.
Oh, maybe they didn't do it.
I should follow up on that.
Yeah, you should follow up on it. Anyway, well, everyone, thank you so much. It has been our pleasure to have you here. Ken and I will be back on Friday for Created Briefs, which we have a ton of news coming up for this week as well. So we'll see you Friday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time for our weekly news show, where we'll run down all the latest news. Up next week, we do have Brandon, the creator wizard himself, will be by with Ash Rust, by the way, to poke some early holes in the creator economy, and also to catch up on the old times back at Clout. We are booked through December 8th right now, actually, for shows. So we probably will do a holiday show. Maybe December 15th is the last show for the year. So we're looking forward to that. And with that, everyone, we will say goodbye. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for participating in today's event.
Everyone.
Bye.